Welcome to Podcast on the Brink, your weekly dose of Indiana basketball news and discussion, brought to you by the Assembly Call and Inside the Hall. I'm your host, Jerod Morris. Join me live at assemblycall.com every Thursday night and immediately following every IU game for our live IU postgame show. And visit InsideTheHall.com for complete coverage of IU basketball and to join the discussion in the Inside the Hall Premium Forum.
Indiana basketball mini-series tickets are now available online at iuhoosiers.com. Both 5-game and 3-game packages are now available, featuring games against Louisiana Tech, South Dakota State, Arkansas, Northwestern, and Ohio State. Come check out your Indiana Hoosiers for these games over break inside beautiful Simon Scott Assembly Hall. You can visit iuhoosiers.com for more information. Go IU!
On this week's edition of Podcast on the Brink, Alex Bozich and I are joined by Kyle Neddenriep, who covers Indiana high school basketball for the Indianapolis Star. Talk with him about Indiana's signees for the upcoming season from the state of Indiana, Trey Galloway and Anthony Leal, and what to expect from their senior seasons, as well as the loaded class of 2021, and also a really good class in 2022 as well. Just some of the names that you need to be keeping an eye on, both if you're a fan of Indiana high school basketball in general and, of course, from an Indiana recruiting perspective, because these are names that you will hear a lot over the next couple of years. So we talk to Kyle about that, get all his insight on that. All of that coming this week on Podcast on the Brink. Before we get to that, though, I want to talk real quick about tickets and specifically our sponsor, SeatGeek. You know, SeatGeek has proven that there's a better way to sell tickets. They have millions of live event tickets, plus a price match guarantee. And we're talking about tickets to anything. I mean, sporting events, concert tickets. I just bought Hamilton tickets on there. The show's not until next June, but I just bought tickets for it because they have everything on SeatGeek. And you get the best prices. And what really helps is they've got this dot system. The green dots mean good deals. The red dots mean bad deals. And so, you know, for me, never really having gone to a show at the Bass Performance Hall in Fort Worth, kind of hard for me to know, okay, what's a good value for this seat, what's not. Well, that kind of visual system there really helped me to figure that out. So especially if you're looking to buy tickets to a venue that you've never been to before, SeatGeek and the way that they display the tickets is really, really helpful. And that's the thing, you know, it's an industry that tends to stagnate. There's not a whole lot of, you know, new technology and big-time developments, but they really stand out from the crowd with simple advancements like that. And they built a really fast way to find tickets, and the goal is so you can stop searching for the perfect seat and start enjoying it. They've got over 50,000 five-star reviews. That's customer satisfaction, and basically they pulled together millions of tickets from all over the web, display them on this interactive seat map, and as I mentioned, every purchase is fully guaranteed so you can shop for tickets with confidence. And you can also shop for tickets with a little promo code in your back pocket that'll give you $10 off. SeatGeek will give you $10 off your first SeatGeek purchase. All you need to do is use our promo code. So download the SeatGeek app today and use the promo code BRINK for $10 off your first purchase. That's promo code BRINK for $10 off your first purchase. All right, now here is our conversation with Kyle Neddenriep. And joining us this week on Podcast on the Brink, he covers Indiana high school basketball better than anyone for the Indianapolis Star. It is Kyle Neddenriep. Kyle, welcome back to Podcast on the Brink.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on again.
Oh, for sure. This is it's a fun time of year. College basketball is getting going again, but as someone who grew up in Indiana and, played high school basketball in Indiana, I always get excited when I start seeing the stories of the games and, seeing all that stuff happen. So I'm sure it's a busy time for you, but also an exciting one.
Yeah, this November time is always, got the crossover for high school football kind of getting wrapped up here in the next 2 weeks. And then this week I'm working on all of our basketball preview stuff and starting to roll some of that out. So it's always, this lead up to Thanksgiving is always just absolutely crazy, but also a lot of fun. And we kind of embark on a new high school basketball season and get to know a whole new group of seniors and other kids coming into these programs. And that makes it fun to get out and see some of these guys as the year gets started now.
Well, we wanted to have you on to, kind of preview this Indiana high school basketball season from an Indiana perspective, an Indiana basketball recruiting perspective. And obviously there was, a few years there of wilderness where Indiana wasn't really doing much on the in-state recruiting trail, but fortunately that has changed some. And I want to start by talking about, the two signees for Indiana, Trey Galloway, Anthony Leal. I was looking back and, pretty much any really great Indiana team you look at that won Big Ten titles, that competed for Final Fours, that won national championships, has had Indiana Mr. Basketballs on it. And Archie Miller has obviously signed 2 straight with Romeo Langford and Trace Jackson Davis. Trey and Anthony are signed. What are the chances that one of those two guys will be Mr. Basketball and that Indiana will have their 3rd straight Mr. Basketball coming to Bloomington?
Well, it's interesting. I'm actually just starting to write about that today a little bit. I think both of them have a good opportunity. I think maybe Leal slightly ahead just because of who he plays for. I think that Bloomington South team has got a chance to possibly win a state championship this year, or at least make a pretty deep tournament run. And in Galloway's case, he's already won a state championship. That was as a sophomore, and then played for a 3A championship again last year. So he has that in his back pocket as well. I think it probably carries a little bit more weight to a statewide audience if you're 4A and not 3A, and actually Culver is 4A this year. So, if Galloway and that group can get to a state championship game, I think he's got a good chance too. But Jerod, maybe more than any year that I can remember, it seems to be more wide open this year than it probably has in the past. I think we kind of knew Trace Jackson Davis was the guy last year, unless an injury or something went awry. And 2 years ago, Romeo Langford was clearly the guy who was going to be the Mr. Basketball if things went his way. So this year, I think it's more wide open. You have those two. You have guys like Nigel Pack and DeAndre Davis at Lawrence Central, that duo. So it's kind of a lot of guys who are right there at the top, and I think it's going to have to separate itself, possibly based on which team goes the farthest, and definitely based on how those individual guys do and what their numbers end up looking like from an efficiency standpoint. But I think both of them are on the short list clearly, and I would give Leal maybe just the slightest of edges, just based on who he's playing with and the potential of that team this year.
You've obviously seen both of these guys play, and I think Indiana fans are pretty well versed in their strengths and weaknesses, thus far. What are going to be some of the individual skills and abilities for those two guys that you're going to be looking to see that they've improved this year as seniors, as they obviously get prepared to go and play at the next level? What are the biggest skills you think that they need to get better at?
I think in Trey Galloway's case, it's probably his outside shooting. And he struggled a bit last year, partially based off a wrist injury that he suffered in January of his junior season. And I'd have to go, I think he shot around 27% from 3 last year, and that he's better than that. He clearly can shoot better than that, and I think he will, and he did in the spring and the summer. So he already has kind of answered that question, but I think from a high school basketball standpoint, I would like to see him have a better year shooting, because I think he's got, and he went on and had a really, really good summer for Indiana Elite. I think he kind of proved why he was getting all these offers, why Indiana ended up offering him is partially based on how he played this summer. So, I think he's got to prove that he can be that knockdown shooter, because he can do everything else really well. He's kind of a glue type of guy. Plays really hard defense. He can guard, multiple positions. He's a good passer. He is not afraid to be physical. He's a coach's kid. So from that standpoint, he's just a gym rat. He lives up there in Culver, where, his dad lives across the street. His family does in a house there. And then he lives in the dorm, part-time, and then basically lives in the gym, the other part of the time. So he's just always around a gym up there at Culver, and, it shows. But I guess from that standpoint, that's what I would like to see from him is just, be that guy who can knock down shots from a consistent standpoint. And if he does that, I think he may be the most well-rounded player in that class.
And what about Anthony?
And Anthony, I think, he has proved that he can shoot the ball really well. Again, I would like to see him, be that good 3-point shooter, and also from a just an energy standpoint. It's not not necessarily that he doesn't do this, but just consistently play with that motor, because I think he's got he's got a lot of athleticism. It's just, I think sometimes with Anthony, what I've seen anyway, is sometimes he has maybe a hesitancy to to impose his will on a game, I guess, and really utilize his full tool, all of his tools. So I think from his standpoint, I think he can do that more. Just maybe be more aggressive, to put it simply. I think he can do that more. I did see him do that. I saw Bloomington South play down at Assembly Hall in Cook Hall this summer in the team camp that they did, and I thought he played really well. And he's got a guy with him there, Connor Hickman, who I really like too, from Bloomington South. And I think those two are a really good backcourt together, and can do a lot of good things. But sometimes with Anthony, I think he's capable of doing more, and that's kind of what I'd like to see from him. But I think he's got a lot of ability too. I think he's a good defender, good athlete. Maybe not the most high end of athlete, but I think he's got good athleticism, and he can knock down shots, and he's proved that he can do that. So I think just maybe being more aggressive, getting to the basket, and just being that guy who can be the leader of that team consistently on both ends of the court.
Kyle, I want to go back for a second to the whole Mr. Basketball voting process and just kind of the whole selection of it each year. Something that's always fascinated me is somebody that's from New Albany. I can remember growing up, people in the southern part of the state saying that, kids from down here have a harder time winning because they're not seen by the Indianapolis media or people in the north part of the state. I'm sure the same thing's set up north. And there's always debates about, what class a kid plays in, the competition level he's playing in. I'm curious from your perspective and from other voters that you've talked to that are involved in the process, what are the things that you're looking for in a player to ultimately cast that ballot for Mr. Basketball? Are you looking for the best player just kind of based on your eye test? Are you looking for statistics? Are you looking for team results? Kind of what goes into the process from your perspective, and maybe kind of just from talking to other people around the state, how they do it?
Yeah, well, Alex, first off, the Mr. Basketball vote, kind of how it works. And I think it's worth explaining to people how it does work, because I know there's questions about that a lot. It's a media and coach vote. So you end up with, I think there's about 700 ballots that go out. All the coaches have a vote, selected media, but a wide range of media too, radio, TV, internet, so you get a good balance, I think. And I like the way they do it, because you do get a wide swath. And I think you end up getting, for the most part, I think you end up getting the right guy, or, definitely a worthy pool of candidates for sure. But I think it's very open-ended. It basically said on the ballot, it says, who is your Mr. Basketball, or who do you vote for Mr. Basketball? So there's really no, it doesn't say, all the criteria. And I think that's actually a good thing. I think, it leaves it open-ended to the voter, who's Mr. Basketball. Yeah. That's kind of your own opinion. From my perspective, I'm looking for a combination of things. I think it partially is the eye test. I think it's, I think sometimes you just know, like, that's the best player. That's the best player in the class. But it's also, does he make his teammates better? I like to talk to the coaches and other players about, how does he carry himself? I like to talk to opponents about, what's your opinion of this kid, or, how have you interacted with him, or, so you kind of get a kind of a wide variety of opinions from different areas, not just the hometown coach and not just his teammates, but others too. And, I think by the end of the year, you can cut your list down, pretty short. And this year, like I said earlier, I think it might be a little bit more wide open, but, I think you kind of know, when you know, and there's definitely seasons where you pretty much know early in the year, this is the guy. And then definitely other seasons where it kind of drags on a little bit longer, and you want to see, is this kid able to carry his team to a deep tournament run and to a state championship, and all of those things too. I think it's fair to say, it's harder in some cases to lead your team. You may not even, you look at sectional 10 in Indianapolis, that's almost like winning a state championship in itself, so it's harder. And I know some kids get, Gary Harris kind of ran into that, where, gosh, he didn't even get out of the sectional, his junior and senior year, but they were also lost to Carmel, which they were dynamite. They were a dynamite team both those years, and they did get out of it when he was a sophomore, or actually as a junior. He didn't get out of it as a senior. So it's tough. I mean, it's a wide variety of things and factors, and it's not just a points per game award. I think it's much more than that. And you also kind of, a last thing is you want to see how the kid kind of carries himself, and because you're Mr. Basketball forever, and I think everyone changes from being 18, of course, until they're the rest of their life, and you hope that they do, but you also want a kid who's a good representative of his school and is thought of highly as well. So I think there's a lot that goes into that award, but most years I think you have a pretty good idea of at least a short list going into the season, and you can kind of even shorten it more as the year goes on.
Let's talk about apparel, specifically IU apparel, specifically the most comfortable apparel that you could ever own. And even more specific than that, the most unique, comfortable IU apparel that you can own. That is what they have at homefieldapparel.com. You've heard us talking about them on this show for a couple of years now. It is absolutely my go-to place when I'm looking to shop for Christmas gifts for IU fans in my life. My brother had a birthday recently. I got him the Script Indiana sweatshirt. Christmas is coming up. Obviously, I got to get Christmas gifts for all my IU podcast hosts. I will be getting them apparel from Home Field Apparel because the sweatshirts are, and I say this not because they are the sponsors, okay, but because I am a man who loves a comfortable sweatshirt. And Home Field Apparel, the fabric that they use on their sweatshirt is so comfortable. And what's really nice is it's comfortable even after you wash it. So that Bison logo hoodie that everybody talks about, yeah, the design is cool. It really is. I mean, that is a unique logo from Indiana's history. It's really cool. But good Lord, it is so comfortable. That sweatshirt is so comfortable even after you wash it. So that, all the T-shirts, if you're into IU football, which I hope you are this year, they've been releasing a new IU football shirt every week. There is something for everyone. They've even got an IU soccer shirt in there. So, I mean, there's something for everybody. As an IU fan, you can use the URL homefieldIU.com. That will take you directly to the Indiana collection. So you can go to homefieldapparel.com and search everything they have. But if you go right to homefieldIU.com, that will forward you directly to that URL. And when you use the promo code BRINK, you will get 20% off your entire purchase. So whatever you put in your cart, you'll get 20% off with the promo code BRINK. So again, homefieldIU.com, promo code BRINK. Get the comfiest, most unique IU apparel anywhere from our friends at homefieldapparel.com. All right, now back to our conversation with Kyle Neddenriep. Kyle, with regards to the class of 2020, you mentioned Nigel Pack, DeAndre Davis, Pack going to Kansas State, Davis, who I think was originally committed to Nebraska and is now going to Louisville. Do you see those guys or anybody else in the class of 2020 who you think, might really blow up as a senior that Indiana fans will watch in the future and be like, dang it, I wish we had those guys too? Are there any of those guys out there?
Oh, yeah, I think so. And honestly, Jaden Ivey, so, one of those guys that I really like as well. And he's not he's not eligible, I should say, to win Mr. Basketball this year because he's headed to La Lumiere. And, so he's staying in state, but he's not at a school where you can win the award. So I really like him a lot. I think the best days are ahead for him. I remember seeing him before his sophomore year at an AAU event at Arlington here in Indianapolis, and was really just blown away by the potential that he had at that point. And I think he started to cash in on that potential and like what I've seen out of him. So there's another one there. But, yeah, I think there's definitely the capability. Nigel Pack is one that, I thought he might end up at Butler or, possibly there, but ended up Kansas State offered him, and he ended up pulling the trigger for Kansas State. I don't know that he's one. I think Indiana's pretty well secured at that point guard position. I really do like Nigel a lot. I think he's going to be a really good player. Already is a good player. Just had a great high school year last year as a junior. DeAndre Davis is one too that he was committed to Nebraska. They had the coaching change, and he ended up going to Louisville on an official and committed there, not that long ago, really. But I think he's another one. I think his best days are ahead of him. 6'6", athletic. And he has a younger brother, Deontay, too, who's going to be a name to watch in the 2022 class that I know is getting a lot of interest already as well. So, that could be a situation where you look back at that and say, dang it, as an IU fan, maybe we missed on that one. But you can't get everybody. I mean, I think you have to kind of pick your pick the ones you really want to go after. And I don't think, that they didn't miss the boat necessarily because they got two really good players in Anthony Leal and Trey Galloway. Now it's just a matter of developing those guys and finding how to get the best out of those two. And, so it's always interesting. I always like looking back at the recruiting rankings years later and seeing like, man, how did that happen? Or how did everybody miss on that guy? And he ends up, being a great player. Like, you look back at like Dylan Windler, who had a great career at Belmont and, was not a highly recruited guy at all. Hadn't even hardly played AAU ball. But those types of stories are fun. He was a guy who could have helped so many teams in the state, I'm sure. But was kind of a late developer. And shoot, now he got drafted in the first round of the NBA draft last summer. So there's always stories like that, and you never know for sure how things pan out. But if I'm an IU fan, I think I feel really good about the two guys that we just talked about coming in that next class.
As we look ahead, a lot has been made of the class of 2021. Names like Christian Lander, Trey Kaufman, Caleb First, they've been on the radar for a while now. And certainly want to get your thoughts on those guys. But, another name that seems to have come on strong a little bit later is Blake Wesley from South Bend. And he was on campus last week for an official visit. He's a guy that just from watching like highlight videos and stuff, I really like just because of his size, his athleticism, his aggressiveness. Can you give a more kind of well-rounded scouting report of him and kind of what he projects as? Because he seems like a guy that has a lot of potential to keep getting better.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. He's also a guy who shoots the ball really well from the outside. So when you talk about well-rounded guards with length and athleticism and can also shoot it, because a lot of times you get those guys who they can do all that and they look the part, but if you can't put the ball in the hole, I mean that's a pretty big minus on their list. But he can do that too, and he's starting to blow up. He's definitely over the summer. Just really kind of blew up and started getting those tons of high major offers, including IU, Notre Dame, Purdue. So it's going to be a battle, but I think IU's in a good spot with him. And I put together these rankings before the season here this last week, and he's one of those guys. Like I had him 7th in that class, and I feel like that's probably too low. But then I look at the guys ahead of him, and it's like, man, that class is just so loaded with talent, and it's deep as well. You can go. I went to 20, but you could definitely go well beyond that. There's guys with Division I offers I didn't even have on this top 20 list. So it's a different type of a class. I mean, 2020's I like that class as well, but just from a depth standpoint, a guy like Wesley, I mean, he could. I think he could be in that top 5 for sure. Maybe top 3 by the time it's all said and done. And I think he's probably a guy, because he's not in Indianapolis area. I don't get to see him near as much. More media probably doesn't get to see him as much as some of the others on this list, but he's definitely one that I like, and I'd like to see him play a little bit more. I'm hoping to see him play during the high school season a few times and get a better sense of kind of what type of player he is, because most of what I've seen is here and there on AAU, and then like you kind of watching videos and kind of keeping up with him that way. But I can't wait to see what his junior season looks like. Like a lot of these 2021 guys, I'm super excited about that class in general, and I think it's going to be a really, really special group. Maybe kind of like the 2012 class was in Indiana. I think it's got that type of potential.
Kyle, who are some of the other 2021 guys that you'll be watching most closely? I know Jerod mentioned some of the names. I'm just kind of curious from your perspective as you start to think about that class and guys. Who are some guys that you'll be watching closely this year, and maybe some off the radar guys that you want to see for yourself that maybe you've heard some things about?
Yeah, Luke Goody's one that I went up and did a story on him this fall. He's a quarterback for Homestead, and he would probably be getting Division I attention as a quarterback. And he's got a really cool family history of football. His grandpa played for the Dolphins and the St. Louis Cardinal football team back in the day, and he's got cousins who played at Northwestern and all kinds of stuff. But he's a guy who I'm sure you guys have know about him, and he took an official visit to Maryland earlier this month. He's got a lot of offers already. 6'5", really good shooter. So he's one I've already kind of checked in on this fall. But you mentioned some of the other names. I think we all know, Christian Lander at Evansville Wrights. I'd like to see him a lot more. Caleb First and Trey Kaufman, guys that are right at the top of that class. And both, I think Caleb's about 6'9", 6'10", runs the floor really well. I've always liked watching him play. Plays hard. And then Trey Kaufman's one. We got to see him play in the state championship game last year. Didn't have a great offensive game that night, but you can just see the potential that he has, and got a chance to talk to him a little bit this summer too, and really enjoyed having that conversation with him. And he's one that keeps rising. When you look at these rankings, he's one that's just a high. Keeps rising every time the new rankings come out. And I think people see the potential he has moving forward. He can shoot it too. So he's going to be a really, I think he'll be a top, definitely top 50 type of player in the nation.
And he can shatter backboards, apparently. Yeah. He's
definitely dripping with potential. That's for sure. And, there's other guys definitely that who are uncommitted, kind of looking down the list. We've had some commitments. Jaden Taylor from Perry Meridian, committed to Butler. And then you kind of look down deeper, and there's guys in that class who are like Jalen Blackman and Luke Brown, and so much is written about those two. They may not end up going to IU or, be IU recruits, but I'm super curious to see where those guys end up going. They can both fill it up, and they score tons of points. But they're both about 6'1", and they're not the biggest guys in the world, but so they're kind of in their own category, I guess, in some regard, but super interesting in their own right. But there's guys on that Brooks Barnheiser from Lafayette Jeff, who he's 6'6" and can shoot it, and he's got offers from Ball State and Butler and others, and you go on down, and there's a guy, Jake Heidbreder from down there at Floyd Central, 6'4", and a really good player, has some mid-major offers already. So, there's so many guys, LT Hatton from North Harrison, 6'10", and I didn't even have him in the top 20, and he's got like 6 Division I offers. And I think he'll end up much higher on that list, obviously, but it's a class, like I said, it's just got full of potential, and guys who are not only top end, but, it's so many guys who are getting mid-major looks and offers already. So it's sort of unusual, really. I mean, we're really blessed around here to have so many great kids to cover and talented players, but that class seems to be taking it to a whole another level that we haven't seen in a while.
So we had a couple of years ago the whole watch with Romeo and seeing where he would end up on the state's all-time scoring list. Are Luke Brown and Jalen Blackman kind of on pace to be in that conversation after 4 years? I know they're kind of not playing the same level of competition that Romeo or Damon Bailey played, but I know that they've both had pretty successful starts to their high school careers. Are they going to be guys that we're going to be hearing about in the future in terms of that scoring record?
Yeah, that's something, Alex, that I'll be tracking throughout the year. I'm sure more than just me, but as we're sitting here now, Blackman has 1,327 points for his career. So you have to get to 31, 34, I believe was Damon's mark. So you're in the neighborhood with your Blackman of being able to possibly get there. And Luke Brown is 1,222. So still a long way to go. For both of those guys, though, you have to, kind of as we saw with Romeo, you have to be able to make that tournament run to get those extra games. Because you're still, Luke is 2,000 points away, basically, almost 2,000, and Blackman just a little bit less than that. So you're putting together seasons of dang near 1,000 points. That's, you're going to have some extra games to play. So that will matter for those guys. Luke Brown for Blackford, they are 2A now and not 3A. So their route to get through is a little bit easier. They're right on the edge of that 3A, 2A cutoff, and last year played 3A, and they played in a really tough sectional, didn't get out of it. So maybe in 2A they have a better chance to get some extra games. Blackman, they're in 3A, so but they also have a tough route to get through there. So I would still be surprised, I guess, would be my answer, but they're definitely in shouting distance and both put up big numbers as freshmen. So you almost have to have a freshman year of 600-700 points, something in that range to give yourself a chance. And both those guys did that. So they have a shot to do it. But again, it's a lot of games, a lot of points, and a lot of great games you have to string together. So we'll see. We know Blackman and Brown are going to get their shots, though. That's for sure.
Kyle, much has been made of the influx of in-state guys that Archie has had in his first couple of recruiting classes, landing Romeo and then obviously Rob Finney, Demezy Anderson, Trace Jackson Davis, and Armand Franklin. And, even Joey Brunk is a guy who played, high school basketball in Indiana and transferred to the Hoosiers. Much has been made of Romeo's freshman season. We don't need to talk about that. And Trace and Armand, it's a little bit early to judge them. But I'm really curious what you've seen from Rob and Demezy so far. As freshmen early in their sophomore year, how has their development kind of tracked what you expected from them coming out of high school?
Well, in Demezy's case, I think we kind of knew it was going to take some time. It was, and I know that, the Indiana All-Stars, I thought he performed really well, and I thought he took on a pretty good role for that team, maybe more than I expected to. And I think he's a guy, he's a really talented guy, and I think he's still got a really good chance to make a strong impact there. In Rob's case, he was almost like I always felt like he seemed like he was almost a finished product when he was like a junior in high school. He looked like the point guard you kind of roll off the assembly line and say, all right, here's a Big Ten 4-year point guard for you. And, hopefully he stays healthy. I mean, that seems like a big thing for Rob, but I always really enjoyed, not only watching him play, but talking to him. And he always, even as like a sophomore in high school, seemed like he was really mature, type of kid, like a point guard who just kind of understood and seemed like a team leader type. So I think he is that. I really like his game. I think as a senior in high school, he really showed his athleticism, and I always thought of him as a smaller guard, and by the time he was a senior, he didn't seem to play that way anymore. So I really have high hopes for Rob. I've really enjoyed covering him as a high school prospect and enjoy watching him now. But I think like you said, it's too early sometimes to tell on those guys who are just freshmen, kind of where their potential's headed. And I think you get a good idea from Armand and Trace. But I think Rob and Demezy both can be really good players at IU.
From your perspective, why has Archie had so much success so far kind of rebuilding the in-state pipeline? What are some of the things that he's done that you think have really made the difference there and turning that around?
It's an interesting question, Jerod. I think, I think in part the momentum of just, bringing in a fresh coach who, kind of a new start type of an idea. And I think that helps. I think the fact that, he talked about making it a priority is important to people, just to hear that. Because it under Tom Crean, it hadn't happened then there's multiple reasons for that. Not just one singular reason, but so I think it's sort of a momentum thing. It's sort of a perception thing, and it's also getting these kids who like playing with each other. And maybe that wasn't the case in previous classes that maybe contributed to, oh, you're bringing that guy in. Well, I'm not I'm not big on that idea. But right now you have guys who I think they all like the idea of playing with each other, and I think that helps. It goes a long way. I mean, you look at, Trace was basically, trying to recruit those guys himself, once he committed. So, I think that matters a lot. Armand was the same way. And that goes a long way. Those relationships, not only between coach and player, but player and player, often make the biggest difference in the world. And I think some of that's going on right now. Joey Brunk and Trace are very close. So there's, I think, some good vibes kind of, between the players as well. But, I think there's a perception when I talk to high school coaches too, that Archie is making it a priority. He wants to recruit inside out, and you can't recruit all Indiana kids. And I know people get upset when, somebody goes out of state and has a good college career, and people wonder why we missed on that kid. And you can't get everybody. I mean, it's just not possible. There's too much talent in this state for that to happen. And some of these guys aren't going to get IU offers like everybody thinks they should. And it's a numbers thing. And it's a size thing in some aspects. There's not as many good big guys here as maybe you can get elsewhere at times. So, I think there is that perception that, we have to lock the borders and get everybody. It's not going to be that way. It's just different than it was in the 50s and 60s. So, but I think he's doing a great job of making making it a priority and kind of getting the word out. Like this is important. And I think it's more than just coach speak. I think it's a real thing. And I think that matters to people here. I really do. I think it matters when you have Indiana kids playing. And, I think it gives you, in some regards, probably a longer leash a little bit as a coach. If you're getting those in-state kids and the bottom line is you got to win. But if you're getting those in-state kids and winning, that matters to people. I think not, the bottom line's winning regardless, but from a perception standpoint, people want to see those homegrown kids stay at in-state school.
Kyle, you mentioned kind of at the early part of the show that it's a busy time for you. What do you have coming up here in the next couple weeks in terms of coverage that we'll be able to read from you at the Indy Star?
We just kind of rolled out those rankings, those in-state rankings, so that's available now. I'm also we just talked about the Mr. Basketball. I'll have a look at that, kind of an early season look. Our super team should be out, I believe, today or tomorrow as we talk here on Wednesday. That's our 15 top players in the area. So that's always a fun. We do a photo shoot and a video. So some of these guys we talked about were there for that and looking forward to seeing that come out. Also, just all of our area teams will have little capsules on each team. All of the Sunday, all of our preview stuff will be out on Sunday. So all the stuff I just talked about, as well as our Fab 15 teams in the state. Gosh, I know I'm missing we have a lot of stuff. I got a little feature coming on the two Lawrence Central kids that we talked about, DeAndre Davis and Nigel Pack. So just a whole bunch of stuff, as well as all of our football stuff with semi-state coming this Friday. So it's a busy time. These 2 weeks are about as busy as it gets, but it'll be nice once we get basketball rolling and we kind of get through it. And it's good to have things to do. I'll say that for sure.
Kyle, I'm going to hijack the very end of this interview here for a selfish question. Do you have any preseason thoughts on how the West Lafayette Red Devils and the great Coach Wood are going to be this year?
Oh, I don't know for sure. I love talking to Coach Wood though. He's the best. He's one of a kind. So I went up a few years ago. I did a kind of a behind the scenes with Chris Wasadik's team and rode the bus with the team to some various games, and I got a chance to talk to him before that trip. They always play West Lafayette, or at least at that time they played every year, kind of a home and home series, and just greatly enjoyed talking to him. And he's a guy you could sit down and talk with for 3 or 4 hours and never run out of stuff to talk about. But just a great guy, and I've talked to him a few times over the years. And I don't know how they're looking this year for sure, but hopefully they're doing well, and hopefully he's doing well.
Yeah, seems like he is. Last time I exchanged some emails with him, I remember after Indiana got Rob Finney, because obviously he played him a bunch, and he said Rob Finney is the best player he's seen come through that area in 25 years. That made me feel good.
Well, he would know.
he would definitely know. Well, Kyle, thank you so much. We appreciate your time and all of your insight, and we'll be watching your content all year long to keep tabs on the best high school basketball in America.
Absolutely. Hey, thanks so much for having me on, guys.
Thank you, Kyle. Appreciate
Kyle.
it.
You bet.
Alex, do you have any thoughts on the Princeton game before we get out of here that we can tack on to the end of the podcast?
I don't. Do you?
I mean, it's one of those games against a lower rated opponent. I just want to see Indiana impose their will on the game and play the game that they want to play, not get caught up in allowing Princeton style to dictate what they're doing. So, and
right.
do you have any insight on how much we'll see Rob, or obviously we expect Devontae to play more. It would be nice to see all 4 guards actually be out there and playing for once.
Yeah, it seems like last game he was out obviously with strep throat, but he looked in terms of just his mood, he looked like he was feeling better, like he was smiling and laughing, joking around with his teammates before and after the game. So I would say it was probably on the tail end of of being sick. So I would hope that he's able to at least give him something tonight. I mean, ultimately, we're kind of running down to the wire here of having time to get all these guys on the court together before a big game happens. So I think from a best case scenario perspective, you want to have these next 3 games before Florida State with your full allotment of players, because you don't really want to have that as your first game with everybody available. So I would think if he's healthy and obviously able to play, I would expect to at least see him a little bit tonight.
I mean, and not just that, but Louisiana Tech, that is a top 100 team. And I know, we've all looked at November as like, hey, Indiana needs to be 7-0, and they do. And outside of that game, the highest ranked opponent is 212th. But that game on Monday, that's a big game because it's a home game. You cannot lose it. And that's a team that is probably capable of beating you if you bring a B- effort, or if you have a guy that you're counting on that's rusty and goes 1 for 10 from the field, that's going to really hurt you. So that I agree with you. And I would like to see those guys get on the court together to just get one game before that Louisiana Tech game. Because it's one of those games. I mean, you've got to win it, so you don't want to be dealing with too much rust in that game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned, what they're ranked. I mean, that's a team that's better than a lot of the teams that have already gone on the road in college basketball so far and had some crazy upsets early in the season. So it's not a game
they're ranked better than 2 Big Ten teams.
Right, exactly. So it could be a more competitive game than the Nebraska game next month. I mean, I think the one Power 5 or Power 6, however you want to define it these days, team that they've played so far is Creighton, and I think they lost by 10 there, which that's not an easy place to play. They have one of the best, for those who aren't familiar with Creighton's basketball program, in terms of their arena and their home court advantage, they have one of the better kind of venues in the country. They draw a really good crowd every game, and so that's a respectable performance for them. And so they're already road tested. They're going to come in with the mentality that they can win the game, and it's a game Indiana can't afford to overlook. As much as all of us can afford to talk about how much we want to see these games in December and how important those 4 quote unquote marquee non-conference games are going to be, it's not a game that Indiana can afford to look past. The other thing I'll mention here briefly while we're still on, looking ahead to next month, those 4 games, if I would have told you at the beginning of the season that out of Florida State, Connecticut, Notre Dame, and Arkansas, that Notre Dame would actually be the 3rd ranked team of those 4, would you be a little bit surprised? Arkansas started off red hot. They're up to 24 in Ken Pom. They've played 4 games against some decent competition and pretty much blown every team away. That to me, that game's becoming a little bit more intriguing as the weeks and the days go by here.
A lot. I mean, Isaiah Joe, their sophomore guard is a guy who's shooting 41% from 3 on high volume. Listen to the absurdity. Jones
is really good too.
Yeah, but listen to the absurdity of their defensive numbers right here. And obviously, they haven't played a team better than 168th, and it's early season, so there's a lot of noise in here.
But they've played better teams. Indiana, so
they have, yes, they have. But their 3-point percentage allowed 11.6%. Alex, that's number 1 in the country.
Look at their turnover percentage.
Their first turnovers on 31.7% of possession. So yeah, I mean and look, we're very familiar with Arkansas, given how much we've played them recently. So that is a good, talented team. But to a certain extent, their ability to become a top 25 Ken Pom team, Florida State's, I mean, they've been up and down, but at least they have kind of a marquee win over Florida that's propping up their computer numbers. But if those teams can do that, that gives Indiana a chance to get better wins, because those are both home games, and those teams need to be ranked highly for those home wins to count, in the top quadrant. So it's good that those teams are better. It's also a little scary because
UConn beat Florida too. So I know they're 77 in Ken Pom, and they did lose that game to St. Joe's, but it's also year 2 of the Dan Hurley era there. So they're obviously kind of going through similar things that Indiana's gone through the last couple of years, where they're adjusting to a new system, a new coach, but they're going to have some talent too. So I think I'm really intrigued to see like all 4 of those games. Florida State, from the perspective of they always are really athletic, and they have a lot of just super talented players. UConn, the fact that it's I don't want to say a de facto home game for them, but obviously they'll probably have a better crowd at MSG than Indiana will, and they have some talent and somebody who I think is a pretty good coach. Notre Dame has always been tough in Indy. I think they have three really good players in Pfluger and Mooney and Gibbs, and they're always well coached and play well. And then obviously we just talked about Arkansas, so yeah, root for those other four teams the next couple of games, because the better they become in the rankings and in the KenPom numbers and all the computers, it's better for Indiana to kind of help prop up what's been a kind of a slow start to the schedule in terms of the computer numbers.
I would say the other thing that I'm really interested to watch for in the Princeton game is how Jerome Hunter plays, because I think he's going to be so important once the competition gets better. Having a guy with his scoring ability, Indiana's going to need him, and I think that his performance against Portland State, where he came in and just looked so confident, knocked down a couple of threes, ended up scoring 9 points. He's 1 for 7 from downtown since then. And look, in the North Alabama game, he still scored 12 points, was able to find other ways to score, and he was able to, hit a couple of non-threes against Troy as well. But, that's the guy that I want to see. Can he start to get into a consistent rhythm offensively? And it may be a little bit too early to expect that, given everything that he's gone through. But boy, you look at that December schedule, and he seems like the kind of guy that could swing a game or two. Based on if in his 15 minutes, if he's an efficient scorer, that could be the difference between Indiana winning and losing. And you don't want to pin that all on one guy. A lot of other things have to happen, but he's good enough that he can be a swing player like that. And so the quicker he can get into a rhythm, the better. I'm not necessarily saying I'm expecting that as early as December from him, but if you can start to see it, that would really be helpful. And, he's just been a little bit up and down, which is to be expected.
Yeah, and Princeton, the other thing about Princeton is they have a very good post player who can score, who's big, and that's really the first legitimate, I guess, big man that Indiana will have faced this season, so I'm interested to see how they handle that challenge. The other thing is, you look at Indiana's KenPom profile, and there's a lot to be excited about. The one thing I kind of want to see if it starts to creep down is, their opponent free throw rate right now has not been good. They've been fouling far too much. I think that's something that Archie Miller is going to want to continue to have come down. It's at 47.3%, 333rd nationally. I know it's only a sample size of 4 games, but that's
against teams with no post player, like you said.
Exactly.
Which is scary.
Exactly. So that kind of goes back to the whole thing we've talked about on last week's mailbag. We talked about the defensive problems, and I think a lot of it starts on the perimeter, right? Guys are reaching, not in position, and that's something that Indiana definitely has to clean up here. They've got not very long to do it. I mean, we talked all off season with, when's the season going to get here? We can't wait to watch some basketball. And now you've really got these 3 games, and then it's going to be a gauntlet from then on out. Could be a gauntlet as early as next Monday. So
could. I do think that number should go down as guys play a little bit more in position defensively when you get all the guards back. That will help. Mm-hmm. But still, I mean, look, Justin Smith's going to have to defend on the perimeter at times this year. Jerome Hunter is going to have to defend on the perimeter.
Trace is going to have to.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not going to totally alleviate the problem, but those are guys that have shown they can defend without fouling out there. So that will help some. But either way, even with that built in, that is a concerning number. And Archie's talked about it. Part of that is just if you're late to a spot, a split second late to a spot, or you're a little bit off balance because you're thinking instead of reacting, that's going to happen. So it's also a byproduct of Trace, Armand, Joey, Jerome, Race Thompson, who am I leaving out? Guys playing in their first year in the defensive system. That will cause,
to an extent.
Yeah, Demezi to an extent. So that's going to cause some of that too. And you can only excuse it for so long. It has to get better. But at least that, to me, like, there's some legitimate reasons why that number is where it is that I think you can expect to get better as the season goes on. Which, when you see a number like that, it's like, whoa, is this just kind of going to be what we are? No. It can certainly, there's some definite reasons to think it'll get better, even in the short term. But it would be nice to actually see that happen before you get into some tougher teams that can really make you pay.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, it'll be an interesting game tonight. Obviously, on Monday, check out InsideTheHull.com for post-game coverage, the minute after, 5 takeaways. What's the one right after the game?
At the buzzer.
At the buzzer.
You can watch the Assembly Call post-game show right in that post. So
that's right. We will have that right there, too.
Go down, listen to the show, watch the show, go down in the comments, pop over to the forum. Just a ton of stuff after every
post-game email at Assembly Call. I mean, we've got you covered. Lots of post-game analysis for another sub-200 game for Indiana. We serve the diehards.
This is a little bit more interesting, though. I'll give it that. I mean, it's not. It's at least a school that people know, and they remember the Princeton teams that always ran the backdoor cut, and I know it's been since 1996 that Indiana's played Princeton, but the all-time series is tied 2-2. So it's not like Princeton's not a doormat that some of these early teams in Indiana has played have been. So looking forward to it.
That is true. All right. We'll catch you on the post-game show and over at InsideTheHall.com. Hopefully the Hoosiers can get things going tonight and get ready for that game on Monday. Our thanks to Kyle Neddenriep. Great stuff from him. And thanks to you for listening. And we'll talk to you guys. What are we doing next week? Obviously, it's Thanksgiving. So we'll try to do something early in the week. Yeah, I guess we'll
maybe Tuesday or Wednesday.
Yeah, let's do something reacting to the Louisiana Tech game. So we'll do something after the Monday game. So we won't talk to you until then on Podcast on the Brink, but then we'll talk to you after that, probably before Thanksgiving. All right. Talk to y'all then. Thank you for listening to this episode of Podcast on the Brink. We always appreciate you being here. Remember to join me and my co-hosts for more IU basketball talk at assemblycall.com and visit Alex over at InsideTheHall.com for complete coverage of Indiana basketball. If you want to support Podcast on the Brink, here is the single best way to do it. Tell anyone you know who loves IU hoops about us and suggest that they subscribe. Podcast on the Brink can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else podcasts are available. Tell your social media followers, email your friends, text your family members. For weekly discussion about IU basketball, they need to be subscribed to Podcast on the Brink. We'll talk to you next time. Go Hoosiers.